Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. It's the smoke-filled room, and unlike Chris, I have a horrible singing voice, but we're going to have some fun anyways, because I'm outside, and I actually finally get to smoke a cigar during one of these episodes. So you get happy, Collin, today, and it's going to be a great episode. We also have some awesome guests with us. We've got Diane Jordan, who's the vice president of the Illinois Federation of Republican Women. She's also the president of the Tazewell County Republican Women. Diane, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm a fan.
Awesome. Well, I know you're going to do great. We're really looking forward to it. We also have Mark
you.
Cavers. He's a longtime political consultant. He's helped elect Republicans and candidates at every level across the state. And I think it's High Ground Strategies, right, Mark? Is that the name of your firm?
That's right.
Glad to have you, man. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And we got that guy, Joe. If you're in Republican politics or have been for more than 5 minutes, you know Joe Weiss. He's here. He's been what my producer called you an insider in here. I'm not sure if you want to be called an insider, but I know you were with the Republican Party for a very long time as the data director. You're a township committee person. You've got your own podcast, which is, just okay, but sometimes fun. What's up, man? I'm glad to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Collin. I think I blew my cover coming on here, but hey.
What's that podcast it's the Lake Forest podcast?
The Lake Forest podcast. It's kind of Lake Forest centric, but we do cover other things Lake County. We had Congressman Brad Schneider on last week. Next week we will have Jim Karras, his Republican opponent, on. So it is bipartisan. We're not leaning one way or the other on the podcast there, but we do get guests outside of Lake Forest.
Nice. Well, and I know your favorite guest is Joe Severino. So next time you have him on, you got to let us know.
No.
I just have to push Joe's buttons. It's kind of fun. All right. Well, speaking of pushing buttons, the Democrats down in Springfield decided to push every button possible in the Republican side of the aisle. And this just happened. This is hot off the presses. People are just starting to talk about this. We're going to talk about this in a few segments. The first thing we have to talk about is how much Democrats care about democracy when it's, attacking Trump and Republicans, but when it's up to them to actually care about democracy, it means absolutely nothing to them. If you ask down in Springfield, at least once a year, they will try to sneak through a bill that is as overly partisan as it can be. And they just did it again, where they snuck a bill through the House in about 3 hours that Republicans had no idea was about to happen, which basically says that you can't slate candidates for Republican for state representative or state Senate. And if you're unaware of the process, for those who maybe don't run campaigns or aren't involved in campaigns, what happens is if no candidates ran in the primary, the party still has 45 days, or is it 75 days? They have a period of time after the primary where they can actually slate the candidate so that the voters still have a choice come the general election. Well, May 31st or whatever the end date of session is, they did it right now. And some people question why right now. But if you've been watching our SFR episodes, you know that one of the Democrat Party's most vulnerable incumbents, Katie Stewart, suddenly has a Republican challenger who's being slated. And so magically, Democrats want to change the rules because it's going to help them out. I want to pass it to you to start us off, Michael, because I know there's a rush now to get our candidate on the ballot before this bill officially gets passed down in Springfield and gets signed by Pritzker. So what's going on?
Yeah, so we found out yesterday at 11:39 a.m. this amendment to Senate Bill 2142 had been filed by Jay Hoffman that would eliminate the opportunity to slate candidates for state representative and state Senate. So, we had been circulating petitions for Jay Keevan. He's the Republican that's running against Katie Stewart in the 112th. As of yesterday morning, around that time, we had 270 signatures. Obviously, the goal, the minimum's 500. Obviously, you want a lot more than that to get somebody on the ballot. So it was a mad dash over the course of the past 24 hours. And we were able to get that number up from 270 signatures to 849 signatures in 24 hours. And we filed petitions today at 2:38 p.m. So the bill passed the House, but the Senate has not voted on it yet. So we got it in time, and he'll be our candidate. So it was a big deal and a lot of work by a lot of people, but we got it accomplished.
Because there's a belief. Listen, when I heard about this, I was flabbergasted, not at the Democrats' brazenness, because that's not uncommon. What I was flabbergasted on is I've done some work. I'm not an attorney, but I've done a lot of work in the election law space because I like trying to help my candidates stay on the ballot and knock off our opponents. So I'd like you probably, Mark, I've spent a lot of time in this area of the law. And from my understanding, you cannot change election procedures in the current election. I've talked to a few people who have said they could probably sneak this thing through, but the letter and spirit of the law says that if an election's in process, you can't change the rules in midstream. So that's the thing that's just got me completely flabbergasted. I believe you take this thing to court, you've got a pretty good case. But Michael, I know the rush is, the belief is if we just get our candidates filed before they even pass the bill, that even further strengthens your case that you can't knock a candidate off the ballot if they are if they followed the legal process as it existed at that time. So that's a little bit of that inside baseball.
I think too, like it's a testament to Michael and some of the other folks down there to get him on and to like not play passively. Because I think you're right on that we would have a case if we went to court, but like why sit around and wait for that? So good for you guys for going on offense, getting a candidate. Sounds like a very good candidate on the ballot in a seat that we can actually compete in and go on offense in like one of the as you guys always talk about in here, like one of the few bright spots in the state that has gone from blue to red. So kudos to Michael and the team, and like a good model that the rest of us should be replicating to be on offense, to be aggressive.
You know, I remember about 10 years ago, they changed the law on this. Used to be the committeeman or the chairman would get together and just pick a candidate after the primary. They then changed the law that said if you're going to do that, you're going to have to get the signatures that you would have had to get before the primary, after the primary. So they've moved the goalpost again. And, you know, I'm not surprised. I've seen this movie before.
Look at the Illinois Supreme Court. I mean, anywhere Republicans show some gains, Democrats, those protectors of democracy, immediately make sure to change the rules so they could be advantaged because of it. I mean, this is just brazen. I don't know if Diane, Chris, if you guys have some thoughts just on the brazenness of this. I mean, I know it's politics, but my goodness, this is about as overtly partisan as it can get from a party. You know, Pritzker keeps talking about rights and democracy, and you know, this is about as anti-democratic as it comes. And you know, Pritzker will sign this bill.
I think brazen is a really good word for that, Collin. I really do. It's more than bold and very unfair. But Michael, well done in getting all of those signatures.
Yeah, it's a big undertaking, and there's a lot of people. I mean, I could go through a long list of people that need to be thanked, but we couldn't have done it without everybody's help.
I think Chris, I was just gonna say, I think the other thing to keep in mind is like, as we're talking about it, it is very much inside baseball, but as we're talking about it to the general public, it's like, do we want more competition in seats? Yes. And so like, it's as simple as that for like an external facing message for all our party leaders to say, we're on the side of giving people more choice and more accountability in elections and ensuring families have a choice. And that's what this curtails.
Yeah. And especially, again, when the Democrats have made it clear, their number one message this cycle is going to be that Republicans are a threat to democracy. That's their big narrative. And being able to undercut that and say, listen, we're not the ones who are keeping candidates off the ballot, who are, you know, going directly against our democracy. You know, that's maybe too inside baseball, but certainly it's a narrative.
So this was the good idea fairy going off in Chris Welch's mind, because he looks at, you know, Katie Stewart and says, instead of spending like $2 million trying to save Katie Stewart, I can put that $2 million into picking off 7 incumbent state house Republicans and get myself into the super duper majority as opposed to the super duper majority that they're in now. This is something that never would have happened under Madigan, because Madigan actually employed this tactic often. He liked to see where the Republican primary went to see if he was going to put a candidate into a certain district. So this is just the new, you know, the new boss isn't the same as the old boss down in Springfield. But I will say one thing. This is brazen, and I don't think it should happen for a number of reasons. But to play devil's advocate, there is an argument to be made, and I somewhat hold to, that if you're not capable of getting yourself on the ballot during the first petition season for the primary, why are we making it so easy to give them another chance to get them on?
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Well, I think part of it though, Chris, is that like sometimes like the dynamics change between, you know, the filing period in December and the filing period that, you know, would have been June 3rd or is June 3rd, unless this bill gets passed. Something may happen that changes the dynamics in a race and you didn't think that you had an opportunity or maybe, you come across a candidate that like, man, this person's a rock star. We need to get them on the ballot. So I think that,
Oh, Michael, I get what you're saying though, Chris, and I do think you've got a valid point, but I think it has to be paired with something else, which is a recognition that Illinois' primaries are in our filing deadline is already way too early. The one thing in this bill is it's going to move the petition season a month earlier than it already is. So you're talking about in August of the year before a November election, candidates need to start filing. And so, Michael, to your point, if the election was if the filing deadline was later, like most states where it's much later, then, I see the idea of locking it down to just anybody who files. But you're talking about from August of an odd numbered year all the way to November of an even numbered year, that people are going to have to make up their minds that early that they could commit that much time to running for office. I think you've got a good point, Chris, if you also advocated for the filing deadline to be pushed back. But because it's so early, there's a lot of people who just can't make that commitment until June of the year of the actual election.
You might as well push the primary itself back at that point.
That's my point.
I don't think
which they did, like when Obama ran, they put it in February
when
instead
it's
of March.
advantageous for them. They will change the rules of the democracy.
That was hell. Going door to door in January.
I'm saying, based on Collin's logic, is that not to move it ahead and say it's going to be in February instead of March or January instead of March, which might happen at some point, and this might be preparing for that. But based on Collin's logic, you're also going to have to do what we did in 2022, which is move the primary from March to June. Now, June might be a little bit extreme here, but still the point stands. If you want to create the least amount of time between primary and general election so that things won't happen to change the dynamic of the race, you're saying push the primary back, and I don't think anybody wants that to happen. But
I'm saying if you're gonna make it this hard to get on the ballot, you've got to give people more time. That's my point.
I would
push the primary back.
It's not like it's a crazy idea. Like it's not like it's a crazy idea. Like Tennessee and Missouri and all these other places have their primaries in August.
But it's a crazy idea to do it in the middle of the election cycle. It'd be one thing if they said, okay, starting in 2026, this is how the rules will be. But to change it mid-game. But usually these elections that where they slate somebody after the primary are usually the races that they can't win anyways, right? I mean, let's be honest amongst ourselves. Yeah. They're districts like God bless the Chicago Republicans, but they're districts in Chicago and some unfortunately unwinnable areas that you're struggling to find somebody. I think this is a unique situation that Michael's been talking about with the Katie Stewart district, where that's a winnable district. Mm-hmm. And there were an unusual set of circumstances that led to not having a candidate in the primary. It's usually when you got a targeted district, you got your candidate ready, locked and loaded, as soon as you can, and petitions are just a small part of the puzzle here. But they clearly did this because of the Katie Stewart race, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, listen, this absolutely benefits. Yeah, basically, you're right, Michael. And this helps Democrats in another way, which is money. The longer the election season is, the more it benefits the party with the money. I mean, certainly consultants don't mind a constant election cycle because you've always got clients, you can always make money. But for the campaigns, every time you add another month, another couple months to the election cycle, it makes the process that much more expensive. And let's be honest with ourselves, one party right now in this state has money and one party doesn't. So the more expensive you make elections, the more you help the side that has the money. And so even just on that level, this whole process, just the part of the bill that's not being talked about a lot, which is moving up the petition season another month, that helps Democrats. Just everything about this bill is intended to help one party over the other. And there's one story that was passed to us by our buddy John Lopez, one of the writers for McHenry County Blog, where actually this change is going to hurt Democrats, which I kind of think is kind of fun and ironic. So we reported on a previous SFR, I think it was last week, that McHenry County State's Attorney Patrick Keneally, one of the best in the state, will not be running. Republicans have slated a candidate to replace him on the ballot. Well, Democrats are now looking at, should we run somebody, because they knew they couldn't beat Pat, but could they beat a brand new candidate? Maybe, especially with unlimited money. Well, guess what? If they pass this bill, they won't be able to slate somebody in that race. So while they don't necessarily care about one county race, it's kind of interesting where this change actually in a little bit might actually hurt them a little bit.
Because they're the party out of power in McHenry County. That's why. I mean, it cuts both ways. There's heavily Republican areas that Democrats can't find candidates.
My understanding is that this bill is only for legislative races in terms of slating.
I haven't read it from. That's what was presented by John, our buddy, who's better on policy than I am. So you might be right, Chris, but certainly worth keeping an eye on.
If
All right, let's talk
Collin, real quick, if your point on moving the petition phase forward is true of not having the first day of filing the weekend after Thanksgiving, I will be all for it. So I don't have to be there the Friday after Thanksgiving getting petition.
Ryan, so our ops guy in our team, Ryan, said the exact same thing as you. They're moving it forward. They're not moving the whole thing forward. So it's going to be 4 months of petition season. It isn't that they're going to keep it at 3 months, but move it all forward. Because you're right. The worst part about petition season is not only having to file right around Thanksgiving, many times you're having to stand out and get petition signatures for those candidates who waited till the last damn second and then call you or us to save their butts. But then you have the challenge period, which is always right over Christmas. And so over Christmas, we're pouring through petitions to either keep candidates on the ballot or knock candidates off the ballot. So if it was to move the whole thing up another month, I think everybody would love it. But no, it's just to extend it a month earlier.
Well, the one thing that I'm excited about is, my birthday is in August. So now I'll be able to get petition signatures at my birthday party. So I got to make sure it's like an absolute blowout. And let's just get,
You should not do that, Michael.
All at one time.
Yeah, you don't know where they live.
One day non-political for you. One day a year not doing politics.
What?
No,
They're not going to
what it is. It's also so he could submit for reimbursement for his birthday party. This is also
there we go.
I'm on you, Michael.
On core strategies.
I'm on you, Michael. All right, let's shift to another aspect of this bill that was pushed forward because this part is really juicy as well. So Democrats are pushing 3 ballot questions that they want to put on the ballot for this November election. There's 2 parts of this worth talking about. The first part is what are they trying to put on the ballot? And so let's talk about that. And then the second part is why are they doing this? Because it's pretty obvious and pretty brazen. They're doing this to keep a Republican question off the ballot that a citizens group has been pushing to put on the ballot. So plenty of topics for you guys to cover. Let me just quickly lay the groundwork. What are the 3 things that the 3 questions that they're looking to put on the ballot? One is essentially support of IVF. One is protections for election workers. And one is targeting people who make over $1 million with a tax, with that relief going towards property tax relief. These are not binding questions, so they're literally just questions to throw on the ballot to help their base, because you've got one that's tied to IVF, you've got one that's tied to threats to democracy, and you've got one that's tied to tax the rich. So very much on the Democratic themes. Interestingly enough, there isn't a question on abortion, probably worth talking about, but this also pushes out, because there, of course, Springfield gets to decide first what makes it on the ballot. So if they fill all 3 spots, only 3 are allowed. So then no citizens are allowed to put any referendums on the ballot. That means Pat Quinn can't put a referendum on the ballot. That means Jeannie Ives can't put her referendum on the ballot. So clearly there's a lot at work here. Anybody want to jump in? There's a lot of places you could go with
Did
this.
anybody point out that the bill was originally titled like DCFS something or whatever? How crummy is that they took a bill that was originally supposed to be something for DCFS and then loaded it with all this crap at the last second? I mean,
at least it's not the soybean bill this time.
Well, down here we always called Jay Hoffman the sometimes honorable Jay Hoffman, but I think after this bill, we're probably going to have to drop the sometimes. It's just going to be the never honorable Jay Hoffman. I think the good point on the IVF is they probably saw that as the safer question to put on the ballot. If you put a question on there that's related to abortion, depending on what part of the state you're in, that could have the opposite effect of what they wanted. If you're, in that, in certain parts of that Katie Stewart district, even there's a lot of people that are Catholic, that are pro-life, that are going to be motivated to get out and vote no on that amendment. If it was something abortion related. And I'm sure there's other, districts throughout the state, like maybe that Desi Anderson one, where that amendment would just not play as well. So I think they probably made a decision there that IVF, you can kind of accomplish the same thing, but it's a lot safer of a play.
Michael, I think that's a solid point, buddy. And I hate to give you credit this early in an episode, but I've been wondering why they haven't been pushing abortion when Pritzker's spending millions of dollars nationwide to put abortion referendums on ballots in battleground states, why they weren't doing it in Illinois. I think you got a pretty good point that Democrats probably believe the only races at play, because they don't think the suburbs are winnable for Republicans. I'm not saying they're right, though, it's going to be tough. But for them, really, their only belief is that they're only really going to struggle in those more rural areas, maybe out towards Rockford, though that hasn't happened yet. But like House District 112, like you mentioned, with Katie Stewart, obviously their biggest target this year is to take back House district. I'm blanking on it here. 114, right, Michael?
114.
Yeah, they want one. They want 104. They want to take Mike Marin's district with Jarrett Clem. I mean, these are districts where, yeah, you're right. Abortion does not play. We've talked about it on previous episodes. So maybe that's why they're not putting it on the ballot. And I think you're the first one to say that in public, Michael. So well done.
Maybe. Well, I mean, just go to Millstadt, Illinois, and tell them that you want abortion like all the way to birth, and see how that works out for you. I mean, it's not going to be good.
Yeah, I think they could have had their cake and eaten it too here. I think because they have this tax on millionaires on the ballot, which, as we've seen previously, tax amendments in this state aren't really doing very well lately. Brandon Johnson's went down because Brandon Johnson's an idiot. The progressive tax failed because of COVID. They didn't have a field program, and Colin's going to tell me I'm wrong, and that's why it lost. Yeah. But tax amendments don't have a good track record in the state, so they could have easily done IVF, then abortion, and then the election poll worker one. They could have done all three, and it would have checked all the boxes they're trying to go for in November. So I don't know why they threw in the millionaire tax in there. I mean, it's non-binding, so it really doesn't mean anything in the long run. None of these are, but it's weird to throw that in and not include abortion when you've been pushing abortion
Chris,
nonstop.
Do you think this is them just trying to get a taxpayer-funded poll? I mean, basically, is it to say, you know what, we've really struggled? Because there's been several op-eds by prominent Democrats lately talking about how their messaging on tax the rich is not working. Is this maybe just them saying, let's gather some data, and on the millions of people who vote in this next election, let's see how something that just brazenly says tax the rich for property tax relief. Let's just see how that performs and start to get an idea of where this message plays and where it doesn't. I mean, this just could be, hey, we need a question to fill the third spot. Let's get some free data. Could be. So let's talk about this aspect of it. So we've talked about this on previous episodes. Jeannie Ives has a group that is pushing, and the Republicans have come out in favor of this, an amendment to the Constitution that says as follows: shall the written consent from a minor's parent or guardian be required before any entity, person, clinic, or school can provide a minor under the age of 18 years any non-emergency medical procedure, medication, pharmaceutical, or any gender modification procedure, gender identification counseling, or gender therapy? It's basically parental consent is really what that wording is. And while in previous episodes we have talked about how we would have preferred a little bit of different wording, that's not the point of this discussion. The point of this discussion is, no matter how good or bad the wording is, if Democrats fill those three spots, it doesn't matter how many petition signatures are gotten by conservatives to put this on the ballot. It's blocked. It won't get on. Clearly, that seems part of the thinking here by Democrats.
Well, I think that, and also like Pat Quinn's push for like ethics reform. I mean, they're basically just trying to like cock block any other amendment from getting on the ballot. That's what's happening here.
Well, as you said, the rural district,
I'm not allowed to swear, but Michael's allowed to say cock block.
the rural districts are in play, like the Katie Stewart district, assuming the candidate gets on, and these other ones. So the last thing they want to do is have conservative turnout in it, because there is no statewide election. Donald Trump is not going to win Illinois, even if he wins the national election. Because if he's winning Illinois, he's winning 40 other states, and he's already locked up the 270, so it doesn't matter. But so they're honing in on those districts because they think they've got the other ones wrapped up. As you said, I'm going to throw my pitch in for the Lake County State's Attorney's race later on in this discussion, that's an important race, but which is a very different district than those Southern Illinois districts or those rural districts. But yeah, they don't want conservative turnout, which is what that referendum was going to drive. Yeah,
that was the point of it. And honestly, again, this shows, Democrats are just, putting their foot on our necks a little bit, but it also shows a little bit of concern on their side. I mean, Katie Stewart, Trump only lost that district by 6 points. Some of these districts are absolutely in play. And I think you're seeing kind of a hidden admission from Democrats that maybe they aren't as strong as they like to pretend that they are. Because if you've got to change the rules to win, then that, to me, that tells me you're just not as strong as you think you are, as you want us all to think that you are. I mean, honestly, that this is, you're losing the game of Monopoly, so you change the rules. I mean, I was great at that. I never lost a game of Monopoly in my family because I was the banker and I set the rules. So, you just change the rules along the way till eventually you win. That's kind of the Democrats' play here, but I think it shows a little weakness. Like you can't beat us on a level playing field. Like they just had their softball game. The House and Senate caucus had their their big softball game this week. It's like, you know what? You can't beat us on a level playing field. How weak are you? Is that how pathetic you are? You don't want to face us on the field. You want to just go run and hide behind your horribly drawn districts and your fake rules just to benefit yourself. Come on, fight us. Pansies.
I think we should just like accept it too. Like we shouldn't even fight them on putting it on. Just like, yeah, great. Voters should have more say in stuff. Put this on, pour more things on. Like go on to issues we actually care about. Because the more we talk about this stuff and like, oh, they shouldn't put it on. They're jamming us up. They're trying to drive their turn out. Like, great, yeah, give it to the voters. Also do Jeannie's vote. Also do something on property taxes. And let's talk about other issues. We want people to have more power rather than more power in Springfield.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen, I certainly wish one of the rules I'd change is that you're only allowed 3 questions, because Democrats have done this before where they just pack the ballot and don't let more questions on. We want to say good government. That's the first thing we should adjust is there shouldn't be an artificial rule, or Springfield should not have precedence over the people of Illinois. If the people of Illinois decide, if thousands and thousands of people in this state sign a petition to put it on the ballot, that should be more important than some politicians down in Springfield who fill those 3 spots. That order should be changed.
I mean, maybe we should do something to where there's like a guaranteed, like one slot will always be open. If people are able to get the signatures, they get that slot. And then, Springfield can put 2 questions on, but at least give the people an opportunity, a guaranteed opportunity to get 1 question on there if they're able to get the required number of signatures.
Yeah, not a bad idea.
I
All right,
like that idea a lot.
Yeah. All right. Mark, to your point, let's talk about even Democrats are admitting that they're a little bit in trouble, especially nationally. A prominent Illinois Democrat, Glenn Pashard, who's a former Democratic congressman. He also was the gubernatorial nominee way back before, back when Joe's old enough. It was during.
I helped beat him.
Yeah, there we go.
1998.
Us youngins aren't aware of that, right?
Got George Ryan elected. Good job.
I leave that off my LinkedIn profile.
I feel like there's a lot of things that all of us leave off our profiles. All right. So many polls at this point. There's a lot of polls out there that show that Biden is down. There was a poll just recently that showed Biden down 6 to Trump. I've been saying for a while that while Joe's right, Trump's not going to win Illinois. I think Trump beat Biden for president nationally, but obviously we'll wait to see what happens. But Democrats are starting to get real worried. And even at an event recently, Pashard came out publicly and said, this race is way too close. It should never be this close. And he admitted there are 3 specific areas that are hurting Joe Biden: the economy, immigration, and the war in Gaza. So to Mark's point, there are topics that we are winning on that have Democrats real concerned nationwide. We've got some really solid topics, solid ground we can stand on to win some of these races. You even have Democrats admitting that fact. So let's talk about it. If even Democrats admit that their message is a bit of a struggle bus here, I feel like that's got to be real good for us.
Well, remember, the Glenn Pashard is the guy. You know how Republicans call moderate Republicans rhinos? Most Democrats hate Glenn Pashard. They call him a Dino or whatever the name is. I mean, he is very socially conservative and gave George Ryan a run for his money. People forget this in 1998. Madigan recruited him, if I recall, and it was a good run. But
he's 12 years old.
but he speaks just as I would argue some of the moderates in the party that criticize things that go on in the party speak some truth. I think the same thing's happening here with Pashard. I think he's not afraid to. He's not towing the party line saying, "Oh, Joe Biden's wonderfully walks on water," blah blah blah. He's calling it as he sees it, and he's raising very good points. That Biden is just. He's a disaster. How else to put it?
I would say it's like even better than, like Collin, you said, it's happening. I also think, and we have this on our side a little bit too, but like they have some base capture issues where even if they acknowledge it, but they still can't moderate on it. And that's a little bit of like the David Shore and the disappearing Democrat majority guy. But it's like they know that this is a problem, but they are handcuffed to their base and can't change on Gaza or immigration, even if it's politically necessary for 2024.
Yep.
Well, somebody sent me a video yesterday, and I wish I knew like the location of where this happened, but there was a protest over, the Gaza-Israel situation. And there was a group of people that were pro-Israel, and then there were a group of people that were, pro-Gaza or pro-Palestinian, Gaza, however you want to like describe that. And both sides were chanting together F Joe Biden, like at the top of their lungs. So it was like a unifying moment between like people that are, opposed on, basically every issue. But that shows you the situation that Biden's in right now, is that on this Gaza-Israel thing, he just can't win. It doesn't matter what he does. Like, he's going to make somebody mad that he can't afford to have mad at him.
Yeah, it's almost like Chris, I want to pass it to you intentionally. It's almost like some people on this podcast were saying how Gaza and Israel and Hamas puts Democrats in a really difficult trick bag. And then someone, I don't remember who, somebody was really fighting that idea. Chris, do you remember? That might have been you.
No, what I was fighting was that it was to the Republicans' advantage, because Republicans misunderstood what was the Democrats' problem. The Democrats' problem wasn't that they're too liberal on Gaza. It's the fact that they're too conservative on Gaza. That's the main issue. I saw a poll last week. 2 out of 3 Democrats oppose funding for Israel. 2 out of 3 independents oppose funding, more funding for Israel. 45% of Republicans oppose funding for Israel. Now that's just
I'm seeing polling that's the exact opposite of that, buddy.
Well, that's the poll I saw last week. So the issue and I'll find the poll if I can, but the issue for Democrats right now is that they have a sizable chunk of their base in polling that is telling them the Democratic Party is too, and Joe Biden himself is too conservative on Gaza. Most of these are young voters who have attached themselves to the Israel-Palestine issue. So
that's where you're right, Chris. That's the big thing. It's young voters. That's why they're trying to cancel student debt. That's why this Gaza thing is a problem, because it's the young voters that make up a good part of a presidential election turnout for Democrats, that this puts them in a massive problem. So I 100% agree with you on that.
And the thing is that Republicans do have an opening here, but it's an opening if they want to play some really dirty tricks in politics, which I don't think any Republican is willing to do at the local or national level. So the fact of the matter is the Democrats have a problem on the left with Gaza. Republicans can either take advantage of that, or they can bury their heads in the sand and say, oh, Biden's screwing up so much it's already in our playbook. No, Republicans need to actually take advantage of this issue instead of keep expecting things are just going to keep falling into their lap.
Yeah. I mean, listen, their answer, Pritzker was quoted in one of the pieces that I read about this, where it was, it's all about Donald Trump and abortion. That's going to be their answer. But again, as we talked about, does that help them win in those Southern Illinois districts? Does that help them win in those, fiscally or socially moderate, let alone socially conservative swing districts? I don't believe that it does. I mean, I know Arizona just put abortion front and center, and it's going to keep happening at least once a month between now and November. But it's not like so there was an article I read in Politico a few weeks ago where Democrats were admitting that they have the wrong presidential nominee for an election about abortion. Biden's uncomfortable talking about it. They don't love his record on abortion for the totality of his career. And so they're talking about, how do we make abortion the issue when Biden is our standard bearer as a party? Even that puts them in a difficult position. So they have now this whole marketing strategy they've outlined where it's going to be spokespeople who are women who aren't Biden, who aren't even elected officials, which frankly is just good marketing. So it's a smart play by them. But over and over in this Politico article were Democrats admitting that, even on their number one issue of abortion, they don't really have a great spokesperson for that in the party.
And they can't use Kamala Harris because she's proven to be a disaster as well.
They've tried that. I mean, they've sent Kamala out, to Georgia and Arizona and some of these other places to talk about abortion, and it hasn't gone over well. So now they're pivoting from that strategy. So, I mean, we always, it's easy for us to say like, oh man, we're Republicans, we're in a tough spot. Like, what are we going to do? But they've definitely got some issues that they're trying to, navigate as well. So it's not only us that have a problem.
They have pushed Kamala out quite a bit in that direction as far as the abortion issue. And I keep an eye on her just as a woman watching her. And she just tends to do those big events and then kind of slides back into the background of things.
Diane, you brought this up as sort of that you have an interest in female candidates and women, and that's our next topic, so we'll get into it in a second. But the more swing / left leaning females in my life who I've had a chance to ask about Kamala Harris, they all hate her. I mean, I expect that Republican women wouldn't like her, but I haven't even met a center or center left female who likes Kamala Harris.
I haven't met too many that do. Some of us watch her closely and watch where she goes, what she does, but she always tends to fade right back into the background. And I don't think they used her nearly like they should have from the very beginning as vice president.
Well, if you
But
go
it's been
back to
interesting to
when,
watch.
if you go
Yeah.
back to when the Ukraine started to be an issue, and they flew her to Europe, and she did this joint press conference with I don't know if he's the prime minister or the president of Poland, whoever the leader of Poland is, and he's correcting her on basic geography. That was the beginning of the end. The White House staff is like sitting around the TV back in the White House cringing at this, I heard. And yeah, so I think that was the beginning of the end for her.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this. So we can't have Diane on here and not talk about a topic near and dear to my heart, which is not only more women involved in politics, but quality candidates. It's something I've done what I can to support in Illinois, big supporter of the Illinois Lincoln series and a number of other organizations that really are front and center on this. We've got Diane here, so we got to talk about it. You know, this is in many ways the year of the Republican woman in Illinois as candidates. I mean, in many of our top tier districts, it's women leading the charge. So I really just want to open this up on what are you seeing? I know there's a handful of candidates that some of you guys want to talk about. Diane, let's start with you just on what are you seeing with Republican women stepping up to run, and are there any that you want to highlight as people that our watchers and listeners should pay attention to?
Yeah, there's of course, Desi Anderson is right here nearby me. Her district touches Tazewell County a little bit. And Sally Owens is running against Dave Kaler. So I'm very close watching them and just where they're going, what they're doing. They're hardworking.
For our watchers, and Lane will bring this up on screen, but House District 91 is the one you're talking about there with Desi Anderson. So just for our watchers who don't know which district that is.
Yes. Desi, and she is just out there every day, and she's posting about it and making her well known on social media, and is working so hard at it. I think she has a real chance to beat Sharon Chung for sure.
Nice.
The other ones, I guess, I'm favoring Gabby Shanahan because of the Lincoln series. Good friend of mine now.
That's House District 97. So Lane will bring that up at post. Yep.
Yeah.
Gabby's awesome.
She's awesome. She's got a great chance, and she's got high aspirations, and I think she's going to hit all of them. I have no doubt with her. Lisa Smith is running in the 96th, and that is she's running against Sue Shear.
Yep.
And
that's one of the races we haven't talked about it a lot, but 96 is one of those that we have in our list of races we should be talking about. Because I mean, Shear won it well. She won by 16 points last time, but there's some Reagan Deering momentum. I know Mark, you've worked with Reagan, I believe. She's awesome, and she's got a lot of momentum in that area. You know, if Lisa gets some help from Reagan in that area, there's a chance she could surprise some people.
And she has. She really has. And I know Mark knows that as well, because Regan is doing great things too. But Lisa, she is out there, and she's gone through some real struggles during this campaign of hers. In fact, they lost their home to a fire just a couple months ago during the campaign, and they have 10 kids. And so she's gone through a lot, and she perseveres, and she continues because of what she believes, and she's standing with it. And I'm proud to be a part of her team and to watch her. And I think I'm 100% on that one. She's going to flip that seat.
That's awesome. That's cool to hear. I didn't know that about the house or about the 10 kids. That's I think this is the first race I've heard where the first box you check in the volunteer form is, are you willing to babysit my kids? Usually it's like, will you put up a yard sign, or will you walk in a parade? This is just, hey y'all, I need babysitters so I can go knock doors. Joe, I know you're itching to talk about your favorite candidate in Lincoln. Give it to us.
Mega dittos to all of Diane's list. And I did a Lincoln Series presentation many years ago. I love the Lincoln Series. Thank you for all it does. Mary Cole is running for Lake County State's Attorney. This is a winnable race for the GOP, and she is a dynamic candidate. I have been in politics 30 years. And I'm telling you, this is one of the best candidates I have seen in a long time. She is, first of all, she's well qualified for the job. She is a former prosecutor, and she is a victim of domestic violence. I hate to say victim, but she has the experience of that occurring in her life, and can relate very well to what is an extremely serious issue in criminal justice. And she has what I would argue is the second worst states that she's running against, the second worst state's attorney in this state. Everyone hates Kim Foxx at this point, even, and we saw the results of that happen in the Democratic primary. Eric Reinhardt is, I call him either Kim Foxx Jr. or Kim Foxx to the North. I mean, there's several different ways to put it, but he is the last now, since Cook County is going to go to Eileen O'Neill Burke, probably. No offense, Bob Fioretti, but there's the last. He could, if he wins, God forbid, he will be the only state's attorney in all 102 counties that supports this failed criminal justice model, and it's well beyond just the Safety Act itself. I mean, there's a horrible bunch of stuff that's happened
he
his
is fully aligned with the far left progressive viewpoint of victim. Who cares about victims? It's all about focusing on the criminals and keeping them out of jail. I mean, you say he's Kim Foxx to the North. I wouldn't give him that much credit. He's a Kim Foxx wannabe.
Yeah.
Because every time Kim Foxx does something, he's like, oh, but me too, me too, me too. I mean, he is a weak candidate who just desperately wants to be Kim Foxx, and he is so vulnerable.
Mary doesn't even need an opposition research team. All they have to do every morning is just look on Lake McHenry County scanner, and there's always a story about some crime being committed, and the person is either let out or they've been let out on a previous crime. I mean, the worst one to me, and I think we're going to hear more about it as we get closer to the election, a pregnant woman in Libertyville with her toddler in the back seat was carjacked in her own driveway. And they ran her over. She's fighting because her toddler is in the back seat. They take the toddler and they dump him on a busy street in Waukegan. Thank God there was a passerby that picked him up and got him to safety. But the rap sheet on these dudes, they should never have been out on the street in the first place. And there's lots of stories like that. And, we just saw this past week the horrible, tragic shooting of the killing of the Chicago police officer. And his family told Governor Pritzker and Mayor Brandon Johnson, stay away. And I am telling you, I talk to a lot of cops now here in Lake Forest because the Kim Foxx thing came up in the mayoral election with one of the candidates supporting Kim Foxx financially. You will not find a police officer in Lake County that hates, and I mean hates, Eric Reinhardt. They can't say it publicly, but when you talk to them off the record, because he undoes the work that Reinhardt, that the cops do. They work so hard to bust these guys. We've got really great cops here in Lake Forest, and then he just lets them out with a slap on the wrist. I mean, so I think, and he only won by, what was it, 4 points, I think, last time, 3 or 4 points. So this is a very winnable race with an excellent candidate in Mary Cole, who I think, like I said, I think very highly of. I've gotten to know her, and she is not a hard right Republican, which pisses off some of, including that former guest you mentioned earlier, and some of the hard right. But this is not an ideological office. I mean, when Rich Daley was the Cook County State's attorney back in the day, a Democrat, obviously, he threw the crooks in jail. This is not, voting on abortion or voting on gun control. This is doing your job as state's attorney, which Eric Reinhardt's not doing. I'll hang up and listen for my answer.
No, that's good. A great candidate to highlight. Mary Cole is definitely one of them. Who else has any, and if you want to talk about the topic at large, or just maybe any women leaders you want to highlight?
There's also Liz Bishop running in the 76th, and she's been out and about a lot as well. I've seen her at a lot of things, so I'm excited for her too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like, Collin, the way you introduced it, that it's like phenomenal candidates that happen to be women. And like, obviously you and Diane and Leader McCombie and Sylvia Legere, like a lot of people have spent time and invested energy into recruiting women specifically, but like, and I'm biased working with someone, but like Gabby's story of like raising her family and pulling her family together and like building the life she has is phenomenal. and Nicole Laha, who like has a daughter with special needs and has like brought that passion to Springfield in the way that we haven't had before. Or Collin, like you brought up Regan, like prior to politics, her work with the Northeast Community Fund or like with the Decatur Public Schools or a tutoring program for low-income families, like what some of these women have done before running for office is incredible and phenomenal. And so I just like kind of the phrasing or the positioning you put it, Collin, because I think we're very lucky this cycle to have some incredible candidates.
You know, I worked for the late great Judy Bar-Topinka, and I think, you know, who was a dynamic force in this state. And I'll go to my grave upset that she lost the governor's race to Rod Blagojevich of all people. But I think Judy would be very proud of these women we're talking about, and she'd be in the trenches trying to help them and stuff. It's great to see. I hope it gets to the point where we're not talking about them because they're women. We're talking about them because they're great candidates. Mary Cole is a great candidate, male or female. She just is a terrific candidate. And that's the important thing that we need to distinguish, that we need to distinguish from the Democrats, because I think sometimes they do get into the symbolism and the tokenism and stuff. And when we run someone, I hope to think, and I certainly think in the cases of these ladies, we're running the best candidate. Gender is a secondary issue.
We had what? I mean, Chris, Michael, I know we had 5 political team members out there for like a year, recruiting candidates around the state. And some of them at the local level that we just don't have time to talk about here that are running for township office or county board, or running for judge. You know, there's a lot of really highly qualified female candidates. We haven't covered. I mean, Tasi Ufardike, in House District 51. I mean, that's one of our best pickup opportunities, and she's a rock star candidate. You don't hear a lot about these candidates, but Crystal Soltow in the Senate District 34. I mean, it's a hard district to win. Stoudemire would be tough to beat, but Republicans are really high on her. Suzanne Ness has a tough candidate in Lori Parman in House District 66. Another great female candidate we have, and that's not even talking about our holds. You look at our list of holds, and there you've got Amy Grant, Jennifer Santalitro, and Jackie Haas, 3 amazing Republican leaders who are already in office, and as we've been saying, happen to be females, but just great leaders. I mean, again, this is sort of the year of the Republican woman in Illinois, and I think we're all better off because of it.
Well, and then I think you also got to mention like people like Amy Ellick and Terry Bryant, Erica Harris, Lisa Holder White on the Supreme Court.
Michael,
I mean,
let me just clarify. I was only talking about people, Republican leaders in races that are up right now in November. So if you want to open it up to all the great women that are in this party, yes. And I hope that none of them are watching thinking I purposely skipped them. It's just, we only got an hour. We're just talking about the candidates on the ballot for November. So, you know, I love Erica Harris and Terry Bryan, and some of them, they're not in races right now for this general election.
Well,
right.
Terry,
the list is much bigger. The list is much bigger even than what we're talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think too, like the Mary Cole race, because like who she is as a candidate and the dynamics of it. I mean, some of the things like with Jackie Haas and like her background with mental health, like there's also people that can be regional influences for good. Like Mary's pretty straightforward. Like she's going to be a banner and a boat or a wave that lifts all boats for all the other candidates in Lake County. And there's other people. I think Regan can do that in Central Illinois. Collin, you said that with Lisa. Like there's some like powerful people and stories who bring authentic compassion that will help everyone else locally.
Well, and I think to Joe's point, these are candidates who are really good candidates. And the reason I bring that up is there's no Kristi Noems here who are going and shooting dogs and basically completely destroying their entire political career. I mean, that was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. If you did that, like how does it get past your political advisors, your editors? Like how in the world do you say, hey, I never ever want to have a political career again? Like that is the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
Can you guys do one of your short videos, like rather than petition collection or something like that? Here's how to edit a political manuscript. Take out
if you fired a gun, don't tell anyone unless it's at a shooting range.
No, Joe, it's not even that. If you shot a dog, don't proudly declare the damn thing. This is like
I don't want to. I love Mike Boss,
like
but
Mitt Romney putting the dog on the top of the car and admitting it that on a family vacation we put our dog on top of the car as we drove to the destination. Like, how dumb are these people?
Didn't something come out about Mike Boss when he was first running for Congress about something like that? Michael, I don't remember this. Maybe you do.
Yeah,
like 2014.
somebody else's dog like attacked one of his kids, and then the owner wasn't willing to do anything about it. So Mike took it upon himself to take care of the situation.
Well, that probably got him points in Southern Illinois. So,
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely know people that have done very similar things, and I don't think it would be a detriment to their candidacy. But you're trying to be vice president.
Yeah, there's a big difference there.
30% of Illinois voters have a dog. 55% of Illinois voters have pets. From a survey we just took.
Ask Bill Brady about that. From
don't be an idiot.
Yeah,
right,
none of the issues we talk about matter. The only issue that matters to the American voters are the doggos. Nothing else matters. Not Israel, not Palestine, not the economy. As long as people can have dogs, keep the masses happy.
Listen, why do you think we bring a dog to every parade we go to? I mean, my dog is out here with me, and he's the cutest friggin' thing on the planet. But dogs get your votes, man. Don't be stupid. It works. All right, let's keep moving because we've gotten some great topics, but there's a few I want to make sure we get to. This is not one of them, I'll admit. So to those who want some inside baseball, for our guests who come on, we allow them to suggest topics. And almost every single one of our guests suggested this topic. It's not one I want to cover, but it seems like y'all do. So I'm kind of just going to sit back and let whoever of you wants to cover this topic go ahead. Mostly because I think this is Democrats trying to make Darren Bailey and Dan Proft the faces of the GOP. That's why you see the State Board of Elections going after Proft and Tim Pony for their newspapers that they put out. That's why you see the Democratic Party going after Proft and Bailey for what they call illegal campaign coordination. This was in the news this week. There was some coverage about Proft making a demand to the Bailey campaign. If you guys want to talk about this, feel free. I just think personally, this is part of a longstanding effort by Democrats to change the face of our party from all those amazing leaders that we have, like many of the women we mentioned, and make it more about Darren Bailey and Dan Proft. Nothing personally against those two gentlemen, but if they're the face of our party, we're not winning. And I think that's the whole point of this, is the more we talk about it, the more we help Democrats. But if y'all want to talk about it, I'll open up the floor. Feel free.
Well, one of the things that, I mean, we had talked about this, internally, kind of as we were hearing like bits of information during that governor's race, because obviously that was before we started doing Smoke-Filled Room. And one of the takeaways that I kind of had was it seems like there were a lot of people who were willing to help Darren Bailey in his campaign for governor as long as he agreed to certain conditions, and he was unwilling to agree to those conditions. So they, took their resources and used them in alternate ways. And if he would have made better decisions then maybe the result would have been slightly different. And he also probably wouldn't be in the situation now.
I mean, listen, I mean, a lot of people talked about the commentary about how Proft and Bailey's campaign manager just hate each other's guts. And let's be real, it's not like we've got a lot of winning going on in that room. So it's hard to say one is better than the other than we're not winning by attacking each other like this. We're in the general election. It's sort of time to move on from this crap.
I just thought it was funny that the media was portraying it as like a pure Chicago moment. Like, this is Chicago politics at its finest. And it's really just Dan. I mean, I guess half the equation is like Dan Proft is kind of a sinister operator, used to be spokesman for the town of Cicero. Like, that's pretty Chicago. I can understand.
He worked for George Ryan with me.
Well, it's pretty Chicago politics. I'll give them
go
that.
way back. He's my friend.
Saying that anything Darren Bailey or Jose Durbin have ever done is like Chicago politicky is like the furthest thing from the truth possible. Like, I guarantee you they were just completely taken aback by like the way Proft was. I'm not judging Proft for what he was doing at all, but they're probably taking like, what the hell is this guy doing? Like, because this is not how these types of people typically do politics.
But, there is so much, this stuff happens a lot. And the only reason it came out, the only reason he got caught was because my understanding of the story was there was somebody got fired by Bailey and he narked on the whole thing. That I think the Democrats better be careful about this, because I'm willing to bet there's been some coordination between some of their committees, Mr. Pritzker.
Yeah, well, it's only bad when Republicans do it. Come on, Joe, get with the program.
Yeah, for the record, I did not suggest this, and I think it is like insanity that it is front page news of the Chicago Tribune when the world burns and everyone like pretends to be concerned about this, but Pritzker can spend $500 million and no one cares, but this is news, like that they coordinated and legally could have if they had just done an in-kind. I think it's absurd that we're talking about it.
Yeah, it's only bad when Republicans do it. It's just like well, I won't go on a rabbit trail. We're already over time, so I'll let us continue on. Everybody good?
On to the
Those
next.
who put this on the agenda, are you guys happy? All right. Speaking of people who should turn their attention towards Democrats and stop fighting Republicans, we talked about Tom Devore last week. I guess we got to do it again. Michael, looks like now Devore, since our last episode, has filed a lawsuit against Charlie Meier. We don't necessarily need to get into the details. I just want to make the point, like, guys, it's May. General election's coming up. The primary's over. Let's maybe stop fighting each other. You want to go back to fighting each other, the week after election day in November? Fine. But right now, with headwinds against us, thanks to the top of our ticket in Illinois, we need to focus on winning the election and focus on Democrats. That's my personal opinion. Michael, I know you've been following this closely. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I was thinking, with Senate Bill 2142 and all the interest in that and what, the dirty tricks the Democrats are playing. And I was like, I wonder what Tom Devore's posted about this. So I get on Facebook and look, and he makes this post about, Democrats are doing this. It's kind of shady. Like, this is, terrible legislation. And then he's like, and by the way, it's Charlie Meier's fault for taking money from the Democrats. And I'm like, seriously? Like, everything is about this now? It's just ignorant. Yeah. There's a lot of other things we need to be focused on. Let's focus on those. We probably don't even need to spend more than 25 seconds on this topic, and it's probably time to move to the next one.
Well, listen, I'm just frustrated because we took time to put out guidance to Republicans late last year. Don't do this. Don't hide candidates or hide comments on your Facebook. You could get in trouble. We had a lawyer write something up. We sent it out for free to Republicans because you put yourself in legal liability. And that's kind of what they did here. So it was kind of an unforced error on the Republican side that has led to this. But it didn't need to be a lawsuit that made the news for sure. It could have been handled behind the scenes, especially during a general election. All right, let's get into some issues. I know we're over time, and I know we might lose. I think, Joe, you might have to go at some point here.
So far, I'm okay. So we'll keep going.
All right, good. So let's talk about some topics. So I know we mentioned abortion, and we've talked about in previous episodes how on abortion, Democrats are the extremists on this issue. And there was yet another situation like this. So in the Birth Equity Initiative, which has been touted by Democrats all throughout the state as being a big focus on investments in equity for health outcomes for Black mothers or birthing parents, as some of them like to say. But there's a hidden part of this bill that doesn't get a lot of coverage, which is it's striking a line out of the legislation, which maybe if Lynn has time, he can bring up on screen. If not, it's okay. But let me just give you the summary. What essentially this does is it eliminates copays and deductibles and waiting periods and any other sort of cost sharing limitations for abortions on any healthcare coverage in the state of Illinois. So if this bill does indeed pass, which it already has passed one level of government in either the House or the Senate, I don't remember which. I'm sure it's going to fly through Springfield. I'm sure Pritzker is going to sign it. This is a major change in Illinois, and it makes it so that you have to pay copays for a lot of things in the state of Illinois, but if you want an abortion, it is 100% free and covered by healthcare. Again, not that I want to be absolutely talking about abortion a lot as Republican candidates, but as if we can continue to show how Democrats are the extremists on this issue, I don't know that a lot of voters are going to align with what is essentially more taxpayer funding of abortion, more everyone funding this through our healthcare. This is like parental notification. This is taking this a step too far, especially for voters in, let's say, Butler's region or Diane's region. I don't think this is going to play super well for them, even if it does play well in Lake County or in Cook County, northern Cook County, where I am. Curious if anybody else has thoughts on this.
Well, I think there's kind of two parts to this. There's the one part where it's okay, do you want to have taxpayer funded abortion through Medicare and Medicaid? Do you want your health insurance provider that you're paying into to also be funding this? So there's kind of the social aspect of it, but then there's also the fiscal aspect of it where it's okay, well, this is going to drive up the cost of healthcare for everybody because the health insurance companies are going to have to find the money to pay for this. Same thing with the IVF stuff. Okay, I understand it's an important issue and maybe it's something that health insurance companies should be covering, but it also significantly drives up the cost of health insurance for everybody else, whether they're using it or not.
Yeah, Michael, I'll just say as an IVF parent, I have spent upwards of 50 grand on this bullshit.
Yeah.
So I may be a little more open to the IVF side of this argument, but I
Sure.
certainly respect your opinion.
Well, the IVF is a unique issue, but I think, I never hear most Republicans support the right to own a gun. Now we can get into the different types of guns and all that, but most Republicans, myself included, support the right to own a gun. I've never heard a Republican or an NRA member say the government should give me my gun. And, so I think if you dive into the polling data a little bit more.
Joe, I like this point. I want to help you build on it. How many Democrats put out there those tweets that are like, let's just treat getting an abortion like getting a gun? Like, to your point, if that's how this was, then that's the point. Then taxpayers need to buy every American a gun.
Oh, so we should have a 72-hour waiting period? I'm okay with that.
You look at the polling data, and most voters are pro-choice. In other words, they don't want abortion completely banned, and I think there's been some backlash of some of these harsh bans in other states. But as you get then you start getting into issues of public funding and late term and parental notification, the numbers drop down. Judy Bartopinko was for parental notification. I mean, so I think there is a middle ground. The problem is if the Democrats own the message, if you go back to 2006 when she ran against Rod Blagojevich, they took that she supported parental notification, even though she supported the right to choose and she supported public funding of abortion. They took that little issue and ran ads that Judy Bartopinko was against the woman's right to choose. Yeah. So, and she didn't have the funds to counter.
Personal PAC is at the front of that. I mean, you talk about extremists on anything. It's ridiculous.
Well, it's called Pat Brady PAC.
Pat Brady PAC.
Pat Brady PAC. But the big thing about this issue is that polling also suggests that the majority of Americans like, universal health care to some extent, but they probably aren't going to like this to that extent. There are people in this country who are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on medical treatments to try and stay alive, and the government doesn't subsidize it. There are people who can't afford the prescription drugs that they need to survive in this country, and the government doesn't subsidize it. But what the government will do is if you want to elect to have an abortion, perfectly free. You don't got to pay nothing.
Listen, I mentioned on last week's episode, my wife and I had to take our 1-month-old in for some scans. It was $1,000 out of pocket. So you're telling me that to keep my 1-month-old baby alive, I got to pay $1,000 out of pocket, but abortions are going to be free. Like there's, whether you like abortion or don't, there's a middle ground here of, it's a medical procedure that there should be some.
The question comes down to how much the voters will nuance. And it depends on the area. I mean, so, and it depends on the race and.
Well, and I guess Joe, like to add to that, it's obviously like a very difficult issue for us. I think we have real challenges with like having credible messengers on it and competent messengers on it. And so like, that's a hurdle. And then I tend to think like, even if we're right on the issue, we are less right on it than we are on property taxes and cost of living. And so there is an opportunity cost to litigating all this. And so like, again, I don't have the answer, but like part of me says like, you have to punch back and you have to be aggressive, but then you have to very quickly get back to the things that we win big on.
Right. Well, and Mark, that's why we advocate that you shouldn't be focused on issues at all. Those issues should be a proof of your larger theme. And so if our theme is to prove that the Democrats in this state are absolute extremists, this is just one thing you bring up briefly, to your point, to prove that point. And then you go into the fact that they're locking down and not letting any candidates run for office. And you go into taxes and all these things are proof of they are extremists. So I'm not advocating that Republicans should have a page on their websites about abortion. That is absolutely not the case. But this is yet another proof of the larger issue, which is in this state specifically, Democrats are the extremists, not Republicans. All right. Looks like we knocked it. Go ahead,
I was going to say we're right there with California and New York. I mean, people just overlook it as like, oh, California and New York, they're the liberal states. And it's like, well, a lot of these policies that are getting passed here are either getting passed right after New York or California passes them, or we're passing them first, and then they're getting ideas from us.
No, Michael, we're not on the same page as New York and California. We're on the same page as China and North Korea.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah,
that's where we're at.
That's true. On abortion, yes.
So
And nobody's
I'm gonna
willing
do
to accept that.
I'm going to do this. I'll tell Lane this after the fact. Let's all just keep creating work for Lane. Let's make this the Empower to Win topic, a shameless plug. So our platform, subscription platform, Empower to Win, through Long Nine Studio. Look, I got the branded cigar and everything. Through our studio does polling every month. And next month in May, we have a amazing poll. Chris has been helping me a lot with this to lay this out. That is going super deep on a dive on what messages work on abortion, what messages don't, how pro-abortion or anti-abortion are voters in this state. This is a super powerful study that we've done that will be rolled out in May on the Empower to Win platform. So if you're not a subscriber yet, I encourage you to do so. We very well may share some of this data for free at the state convention. So stay tuned, because I think if Republicans are struggling on the issue of abortion, we're going to have a ton of data to tell you where you should stand on this issue as you go into November in terms of how you should talk about it, what words and phrases you shouldn't use. This is all going to be available to our subscribers. So the one shameless plug during this episode, but our subscribers are going to get thousands of dollars of data for pennies on the dollar if they subscribe. So forgive me, guys, but it felt like a good time to slip that in. All right, let's go to our next topic. We got some Bears fans here. Joe, I know you're a Bears fan like I am, so maybe you want to kick us off on this.
I'm a disgruntled Bears fan.
Wow, yeah. We talked about it last week about the Bears' new stadium, but since our last episode, JB Pritzker's office had a meeting with Kevin Warren and some of the top brass in the Bears business office, and came up publicly immediately after and said this new proposal is a non-starter, quote unquote. So I guess my point is, unless maybe the Bears could sell to a Chinese company, because it seems like if you were like a Chinese battery maker, Pritzker will open his wallet for you. But if you're an Illinois business, maybe not so much. I don't know. Joe,
I think first of all, the investment level in those battery things is much
lower. Come on,
lower
let me
than
have
what
some fun with this, dude. Come on.
But I think you guys may have talked about it last show, but I don't know how you make a proposal of this magnitude that involves state funding and you don't talk to the governor before you go public with the proposal. Okay, forget what we think about JB Pritzker. He's still the governor of the state, and nothing's going to happen unless he signs off on it. I mean, it's not like the days where Rauner got overridden on vetoes. If Pritzker doesn't want it, it ain't happening. So what were the Bears thinking launching this without the governor there? So this is still going to go back and forth, and who knows? And the cynic in me says eventually they'll bicker it down and Pritzker will give in to a lower amount or something. But SoFi Stadium out in LA, I believe, was privately funded. And there's some other examples. I mean, Wrigley Field was privately funded, and the United Center was too. So I think the climate right now, that Pritzker is making the right political move. I think the climate is such that people don't want taxpayer money going towards pro sports teams anymore, particularly when the pro sports team is losing. So maybe if the Bears were like the 85 Bears, that would be a different story.
Well, and Joe, your point is valid for Reinsdorf. I mean, White Sox, you couldn't get $1 of public funding for the Sox right now.
Yeah, and the days of Jerry Reinsdorf just going and asking Mike Madigan and Jim Thompson to get it through, those are over with, obviously.
Yeah.
I think the Bears' biggest flaw, like I've mentioned before, in this whole process, is tying themselves to Brandon Johnson. Because anecdotally, you look at comments on social media regarding the Bears' new stadium, all of it is like the stupid mayor Brandon Johnson wasting more of my tax dollars. Like, this is another harebrained scheme by Brandon Johnson. Like, the fact that Johnson and the CTU were on that stage just put into people's minds, this is a bad thing because everything these people touch is bad. If Pritzker was on that stage, or if Harmon or Welch, these are people who, while the members of this podcast might not like them, the average schmuck in the state of Illinois looks at them and says, okay, it's the state doing something. But when people look at Brandon Johnson doing something, they immediately say, this is going to be bad for my pocketbook and my well-being. I do not want this to happen.
Well, Chris, to your point, I mean, how many times in this episode have we salivated at Brandon Johnson's low approval rating? And as people who run a lot of races in the suburbs said, great, because we're losing Kim Fox. So now we can just tie our opponents to Brandon Johnson. Like, it's a basic 101 strategy that we understand that if you tie your opponent or any initiative to Brandon Johnson, it's going to fail. It's going to do badly. And yet here the Bears do. The first thing they do rolling it out is let's put Brandon Johnson on it. It was doomed to fail from the start.
As a Packers fan, it sounds like the incompetence of the football operations side crosses over to the business operations side.
You're a Packers fan, Cavers?
Yeah.
Pat,
You did, like I said, my
Well-
first and last time on the podcast.
I was gonna say, Wayne, make a note. It's been great having Mark on. All right, well, let's get into. We got a couple more topics here. We got a little time. Thank you everybody for staying overtime. We didn't get to this last week, so I want to open it up because I know people really did want to cover this. Pro-Palestinian protesters are a growing headache for Democrats. A few weeks ago, they shut down traffic on the way on 190 on the way into O'Hare. That caused a whole bunch of problems. We've had on our agenda for months to talk about this because in Chicago, this has been a big controversy as it's been fighting back and forth. And Brandon Johnson's been trying to bridge that gap and failing very badly. And then the last couple of weeks in Northwestern, we had the protests on the campus there. So this is definitely a growing issue. And we know as we get closer to the DNC in Chicago, this is going to be the big thing, the big topic of protests in the city of Chicago. So this ain't going away for Democrats.
So no
We
matter
had a
how-
protest today in Lake Forest at the high school. Like 10 kids walked out. I mean, 10 kids, but so yeah, this is crazy. These kids see this on TV and like, oh man, and they can't even explain what they're protesting. But that's
Right.
So no matter how bad you think things are now with the Palestinian protests, the shutting down campuses, shutting down highways, going into major airports, right now what you're dealing with young liberals who don't have jobs on the weekdays, and then you're dealing with the Palestinians on the weekends who have jobs and want to protest on the weekends. That's what you're dealing with right now. When the DNC comes, you are dealing with every liberal who supports Palestine and the entire Palestinian American community across this country who are going to converge on the city of Chicago for the specific purpose of protesting the DNC on behalf of the Palestinian cause. And I don't think that is going to be a good thing politically for Democrats, because I don't think anybody on this podcast or in this city believes that they're going to be able to contain the protesting that will happen at the DNC.
Chris,
So
how many of your friends? I know probably 24 friends in Chicago who have already booked a trip or a vacation or something to get out of the city for that week and a half. I mean, it's crazy.
Oh, yeah. I have a buddy of mine who works downtown, and he was like, oh, I might go to the convention. I might take that week off. I said, no, you're going to take that week off and you're going to sit at home and watch on the television is what you're going to do. Because, again, I think this is going to get bad. I don't think we're going to have the manpower. God bless Chicago police, but I don't think they're actually prepared for the amount of people they're going to get in Chicago protesting. And this, yes, is going to be to the Republican Party's advantage if they play it properly. And I would love to see what would happen with these protests if maybe they swap Biden out at the convention. That's conspiratorial. That's the tinfoil hat going on. But could you imagine how bad these protests will get if they swap him out for J.B. Pritzker or somebody else? Could you imagine?
You heard it here first.
Even I am not old enough to remember the 1968 Democratic Convention
you
in
are. You're just
Chicago.
pretending.
I was born a year later. But I had to do a book report or a report on it in school. So
On the typewriter?
yes. And how did that end? Who won the 1968 presidential election? Who has a very similar personality to the current Republican presidential nominee? Nixon beat Humphrey that year, and a lot of people looked to that Democratic convention as part of the whole rage that was going on in the country back then about the Vietnam War. And then the conservatives saying enough's enough, and they turned out enough that Nixon won that election. Now, this is not 1968, and I'm sure every Democrat in Chicago is acutely aware of what happened in 68 and making sure not to have it happen again. You'd think, of course, Brandon Johnson makes a lot of dumb moves, but it doesn't look good for them when this
City
happens.
Hall, Joe, in City Hall, those are just called moves.
Mayor Daley, the first Mayor Daley is turning in his grave over Brandon Johnson, but yeah,
even the second is turning over.
Well, he's still alive.
But even he's looking at this saying that's pretty.
But I'm just saying, to
something.
Chris's point, it is going to get worse. It's going to get worse, and it's going to be a freak show on TV. And I think a lot of people a lot of swing voters in swing states, which is what matters in presidential elections, but then swing voters in some of these districts we've been talking about earlier are going to be like, we need the Republicans.
Yeah, and I agree with Joe's point 100% on this, because even if my recollection of the polling I saw is inaccurate and people aren't moving to the Palestinian side as fast as maybe some people think they are, the fact of the matter is they don't like the protests. They don't like driving down I-90 and then there's a blockade a mile up and then they can't get to work or they can't make their flight. They don't like these people camped out on college campuses demanding the university bring them food and water to the building that they're occupying from,
and holding a janitor hostage.
Right. Like, no matter what the opinions of many Americans might be on the Israel-Gaza conflict, I think most of them will agree that whatever is happening with these protests and what is going to happen with these protests is a bad thing, and that should not happen like this.
Well, and let's be honest with the timing on this, it's not ideal for Democrats, because even though Kim Foxx has said that she's going to treat these protests at the DNC differently than she treated previous protests, I'm sure there's a lot of people who don't believe that smoke is real. And there's a lot of people who are going to believe, guess what? Kim Foxx is still in office. I can do whatever the heck I want. And to your point, Chris, this could get pretty bad.
I think Representative Ugasti got some good press on his legislation. So I think we have to think about, as Republicans as a party, is this one of those stay out of your opponent's way when they're destroying themselves, or who
Chris,
and how do we?
Chris, are you hearing this? Mark, you're making a good point. Go ahead. Mark's making a good point. Keep going.
I don't know if it's I don't know if it's that approach, or I mean the other one is right, there currently there aren't a lot of Republicans who are speaking up on these issues in Illinois, right? Nationally there are. But if we're going to speak up on it in Illinois, who are those people that are measured and thoughtful and can take that message?
There's a few that have, Keith Brin is a Jewish Republican up in Lake County. He's the chairperson up there. And he's spoken out. He's done a few op-eds and stuff and done a really good job. We don't have a lot of Jewish leaders in the party at this point who are super outspoken, but there's a few like Keith I know who have, Mark, to your point. But I've been making that point to Chris and a few others that when your opponent is lighting their own house on fire, you don't need to. Sorry, forgive my term, because this is going to get crass, but I'm a Cook County person, so whatever. But when your opponent is letting their own house on fire, don't piss on them and set it up and set the fire off. Basically, at this point, let them light their own house on fire. They don't need any liquid.
Well, one of the things, I don't know if you guys have seen some of the pictures, but I just got a couple of them texted me a little bit ago while we were on here. That at some of these colleges around the country, some of the fraternities, the male fraternities, are kind of surrounding the flagpole and in a peaceful way.
That was cool.
and protecting the American flag from these radical leftists that are trying to tear it down and those kind of things. And I mean, it's just heartwarming. It's great to see. I almost think we need to try to figure out a way to bring Norman Rockwell back from the grave so we can paint some of these, images, so we can put it up on the wall. I'll put it up here and then I'll actually have a background for Smoke-Filled Room. But I mean, that's something that is just incredible. And
Michael, listen, my
really
wife
gets me going.
My wife is super artsy. She likes you a little bit. Text her. Maybe she could get something for you.
Maybe she can make something up. I don't know. But, I think that there's an opening there with some of these college-age males that we really need to tap into. I mean, you got Chuck Schumer trying to take Zens away from us. And then you see these pictures. It's maybe we can do something here.
And Michael, to that point, Alexia Giannoulias is trying to take away their Mountain Dew. I mean, you could build up a list here.
What am I going to do? Next thing you
out
know,
of my cold dead hands, Mr. Giannoulias.
Right. All right. So here's the deal. We have never gotten through an entire agenda on an episode of SFR. We're on the 51st episode. So we're going to hit this last topic just for that reason. This is groundbreaking on episode 51 that we get every topic in. So I know we're over, but this is kind of exciting for me. So let's hit this last topic. We missed it last week, and I know Craig and a couple others really wanted to cover this, but it has gotten no coverage because, of course, it's Pritzker and the Democrats. But the number of state employees who have been caught ripping off PPP is now over 250. Let me reiterate that. Over 250 state employees, and they're still searching, and they're still finding more. Over 250 state employees have been caught ripping off PPP to get loans that were forgiven for themselves, not for any sort of actual business, where this was legislation that was passed to try to help small businesses, try to help workers keep their money and pay their bills during COVID. And you have state employees, a large number of state employees who have gamed that system. Only in Illinois or maybe Louisiana or New Jersey would this happen. But of course, Pritzker's getting a pass because, first of all, he never takes responsibility for anything that happens in his administration. And second, he's the billionaire governor who might run for president. So all the media wants to kiss his butt. But this is real and this is a problem. Anybody got thoughts on this?
Well, I just think, my brother is a small business owner, and he has moved to Florida for, a lot of reasons that we could probably go into. But, he got some PPP money for his small business, and the hoops that he had to jump through to qualify for that, making sure he had all his ducks in a row and that he was in compliance. I mean, things like this are just offensive to small business owners across, Illinois and this country that are trying to figure it out and make things work and do things the right way. And here you've got 250 state employees that fraudulently did this, allegedly. And hopefully there are consequences for every single one of them.
Well, so this was also an excuse to do this. So I'm going to play you guys a song about J.B. Pritzker that I came up with that I'm frankly a little bit proud of. Thanks to AI. I'm not musical at all, but I'm going to play it here so you guys hear it. Lane will bring it up in post because the audio probably won't be great because I'm going to play it off my phone. But I want to get your guys' reaction to my first attempt at being musical. So let me see if this works, if I can play this for you.
Collin hopped in the stew.
I'm J.B. Pritzker, governor of Illinois, sitting in the office, thinking I'm the boss. But every time there's a problem, I just throw it across. Blame the Republicans, blame old Bruce Rauner. It's time to face the truth, it ain't minor. Cost of living rising, people feeling strain. But instead of taking blame, I just shift the pain. Blame it on Republicans, blame it on the rich, but it's my spending habits that got us in the ditch. Crime's getting wild, streets ain't safe no more, but I just point fingers like it ain't my core. Blame it on the system, blame it on the past, but responsibility ain't something that I grasp. I'm J.B. Pritzker, it ain't my fault.
I think that's J.B. Pritzker's anthem. But at this point, I wanted to use there's a service that lets you like put in some input and then it outputs like lyrics and it puts a song to it, and it's actually really good. And so our viewers were able to listen to it there, and it's a song about how J.B. Pritzker likes to dump the blame on everybody but himself. So there's my attempt at being musical, and it was probably an abject failure. But I had
Don't quit your day job, bud.
Well, no, I listened to it, when you sent us the recording, and that was of the ones you sent, that was probably my favorite. There was another one that was pretty close though. And I think we're going to have to work on this, but what if we had like a segment of the convention where it's, the Collin Corbett soundtrack or whatever you want to call it. I mean, we can get probably 10 minutes for you. You don't have to actually perform. You don't actually have to perform it. I'm sure we can pipe it in or do something.
That convention is going to be so long anyways, and then I have to drive home from Collinsville. Please, don't belabor that.
Come on.
It's a convention in Collinsville. I'm Collin. I mean, come on.
Well, yeah.
You'll have the
It's 6 hours from my house.
Hey,
and I love the Collinsville.
Listen, I love this line, but responsibility ain't something that I grasp. I mean, there's a lot of good lines there about how, when was the last time J.B. Pritzker, our governor, took responsibility for anything in this damn state? And we're 6 years in, and he's still blaming it on Rauner. He's blaming it on Republicans, on the rich, on the system, on, national Republicans. I mean, we're 6 years in. I'm wondering when J.B. Pritzker's ever going to take responsibility for anything.
Well, these were, this was my first thought whenever you sent those, and I know that Chris and Collin, you can vouch for it because I sent it in that thread. I was like, is this getting played somewhere? Is this going to be on the radio? Is this an ad? Are we getting a sneak peek of something that's really good? I mean, I think this is something that we got to think about doing in the future in some of these competitive races, because I mean, that could be a radio ad on a country station, and people would tune in. They would listen to that.
I mean, listen, I am shocked at how technology is nowadays. As you can tell, I just became aware of this service like a week ago. I've had a lot of fun with it, but when you can, I mean, it took me 2 minutes to spit that song out, and it's an actual song. There's backup singers. There's like a singer in the front of it. Like, that's impressive.
Yeah.
I don't know. I had some fun with it, but anyways, as anybody who watches these episodes knows, since I'm like the only one out there who's actually attacking JB Pritzker, I got to keep bashing at it, hoping somebody else decides to jump in here.
And I'm just impressed that the podcast can go from the incredible value add of the Empower to Win product to music developed, written, and produced by Collin Corbett. So I get you a second pitch in there for your product. And
well, listen, Mark's right. You can tell anything that comes out of Corey that's quality, it's probably Michael, Chris, and our team who did it. And then when I have a hand in something, it's a horrible song produced by me. So it's probably awful, but whatever. We had some fun. All right, let's close this down. I've derailed us way too much here, and Lane is absolutely going to kill me. So closing thoughts. We always start with our guests. Diane, you've been awesome. Thank you for what you brought to the episode, especially advocating for Republican women across the state. Final thoughts from you as we close down the episode.
I really am excited to be a Republican woman right now in Illinois. I think that we are on the rise, and we have lit a fire. And I think that these candidates that are running right now have a great opportunity. They have great stories, and I'm excited to just be a part of it all, and however I can help.
Well, if anything, I just love that some of our watchers are getting a chance to meet you, because Michael speaks so highly of you, and you're a rock star in your own right. So we should give you some kudos while we're here.
Thank you.
All right, Joe, what do you got?
Well, I echo everything she said about the women candidates, and of course, Mary Cole especially. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunity this year, definitely, but it's not going to be a cakewalk. All right, this is not 1994. There's going to be a lot of work that goes into this, both just turnout. I think it's an old cliche, but turnout always wins, and the campaign that wins a close election is the one that worked harder. All right. And that's not just who has the best ads. It's going door to door. It's doing the grunt work that people don't want to do. And on message, which we talk a lot about, you got to be very, very careful, because you can see how quickly someone can literally shoot down their campaign in the case of Kristi Noem. But you just, every district's different, and what plays in Southern Illinois doesn't play in the Chicago suburbs, and vice versa. So know your district and work the district the way it needs to win, and follow that 80-20 rule instead of and don't let, what's the phrase? Don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Yeah, I like it. Mark, kudos to you, man. Just I think you're one of the brightest minds Republicans have in the state of Illinois. So I'm glad you're with us. And any closing thoughts from you?
Oh, I appreciate that. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys. Appreciate all the work you guys do, and look forward to continue to work with you.
Awesome. All right. Who went first last time, Michael or Chris?
I don't know.
All right, Chris, why don't you give us your final thoughts?
So my final thoughts are a message of congratulations to the Homer Township Supervisor and Will County Board Republican leader Steve Ballot, who won his coin flip today to win his precinct committeeman race. We have stopped the steal, gentlemen. So to all enemies of Steve Ballot, if you come at the king, you best not miss, because we have won again. So congratulations to Steve, and congratulations to everybody in Will County for keeping a wonderful hard fighter in the organization. Thank you.
All right, Michael, our ray of sunshine. Close us out, buddy.
Jeez, I was just going to say that, if we can get like 600 signatures in 24 hours, then what can't we accomplish? That's kind of my mindset right now. So let's go win some seats.
In a state rep district, I mean, you're talking about, we got 10,000 signatures for statewide candidates in a weekend, but that's because in a weekend in a couple days, because we could go to train stations, and that was pre-COVID, where you could get a few hundred signatures at one train station in like an hour. But do it in a state rep district, that's tough, man. So kudos to everybody who pulled that off. All right.
yeah.
Thank you to our guests. Thank you to everybody for joining us, to our watchers. Lane, just not thank you, but I'm sorry because you're going to be up late getting this episode pulled together. But for our 51st episode, I think we nailed it. Thank you, everybody. We will catch you next week on what will be our 1-year anniversary of hosting these SFRs. We've got some pretty fun things planned. We might even share some exclusive poll numbers that nobody has seen yet. We're debating that internally and if we release that to the general masses. So there might be some pretty special stuff that happens next week. So don't miss next week's episode. And in the meantime, have a wonderful week, everybody.